Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcock. So glad you could be with us tonight. We got a little follow-up from last week's show. I wanted to go back and touch base on a couple things. As it turns out, there was an error in something I said last week, and if you watch the show regularly, you know I try to be accurate, and when I find that I'm not, I'd like to come back and offer up a correction or retraction or whatever is called for. But after re-looking at one of the pictures from last week's show and doing a little more research, I realized that I had mistakenly stated that a picture we looked at last week was of the fairground over off Fairview Road. After looking at that picture again and reading the caption again and looking at some old maps of Rocky Mount, I realized that was not correct. In fact, Lee, if you would go ahead and put up item number 1, this is the picture that we showed last week of a grandstand that was at the Rocky Mount Fairgrounds in, I think it was 1906 that this picture was made. And it was one of those from the John Sorsby collection. If you remember, we were talking last week about John Sorsby, who ran a hardware store down on Main Street and later moving over to Howard Street. His son, John Sorsby, referred to as John Sorsby Jr., even though they had a different middle name, was a fire chief in Rocky Mount some years later. But John Sorsby, in addition to being a business owner and an avid outdoorsman, he was also an amateur photographer. And last week we looked at about 25 or 30 of his pictures from what was referred to in the Telegram as being from the Sorsby collection. I am still scouring, trying to find any of the original of those images from the Sorsby collection. So far, I've not found anything but what I've been able to retrieve from the newspapers.com website. And admittedly, they're grainy. They're hard to really get a lot of detail from. But we're going to share a few more of those tonight. There you go, Lee. This is one that we showed last week. And I'm just going to reread this caption because this is where I realized that I had made a mistake in what I had said last week. What the caption says is, the grandstand for the fair is completed. The late Dr. Joe, by the way, this appeared in the Telegram in August of 1942. But you'll see in a minute it's referring to a fair that took place in 1906. Anyway, it says the late Dr. Joe P. Whitehead in his 2-cylinder Oldsmobile takes the late J.R. Sorsby and a couple of friends out to the fairgrounds to note the progress that is being made in anticipation of the coming Rocky Mount Fair on its new site on the Norfolk Branch Line Railroad in the fall of 1906. The grandstand is completed and scaffold removed, and the guests for the auto ride climb into the grandstand and the photo is snapped. The automobile is placed where it could show in the picture, but closer objects like the railing of the racetrack and its supporting posts were not taken into account. A careful look at the picture will disclose that the fence around the enclosure has not been completed, although some of the concession eating places have been constructed. This fair was the successor to the long list of successful fairs that were held on what was later the baseball park in front of the present office of the China American Tobacco Company and in the rear of Parkview Hospital and the residences along Falls Road west of the hospital. That event is said to have been the outgrowth of the riding tournaments that were held at Old Sparta and were moved to Rocky Mount by the late S.K. Fountain and others with the coming of the railroad. So as it turns out, this fairgrounds, and the Rocky Mount Fair was held in a couple different locations over the years. Some of us old enough remember when it was over on the Fairview, at the end of Fairview Road down there. And of course, for many years after that, it was out on Highway Old 64, going out toward Tarboro. But in fact, it was at a couple different locations down off of Falls Road. And this picture was taken there, as the caption implied, kind of behind the Parkview Hospital over there in the area generally associated with Brazel Park. But anyway, when I realized that mistake, I wanted to come back and correct that. And so while I was looking for any other evidence to support that, I was doing some research this week and just trying to see if I could get either an address or something to quantify that even more. And while I didn't find an address, I did find a couple of neat ads that appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram going back to the early 1900s. Lee, if you would, put up item number 2. This ad appeared in October of 1916, and you see there the headline reads, Rocky Mount Fair, Grand Fireworks Display Tonight. Shuttle train leaves the depot for the grounds at 7:30. Returning leave grounds at 10:40 p.m. Price 10 cents. So you could go to the train station and hop on a train, and like a shuttle would carry you over to the fairground and drop you off there. And you could stay till the time to go home, and then get back on a train and ride back to the train station and get off. So it was convenient, and I understand that that same option was available in some years later when the fair actually moved out to where we spoke about earlier, into Fairview Road out there. But anyway, this was in 1916, and if you watch the show regularly, I've been advocating for some time now for the Rocky Mount Fair to get fired back up, if you will. Frankly, I miss having a fair around here. One of my favorite things to do as a child was go to the fair. I have some very fond memories of going with my parents and my siblings and even friends from school and so forth. It's just something that I think Rocky Mount sorely misses, and it's a shame that we don't have a local fair anymore. I'm still optimistic maybe somebody will take the initiative and get us another fair going, and anything I can do to assist, I'd be more than happy to. With that being said, let's go to item number 3. This ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram in July of 1919. And you see it says the big event of the 4th of July, the Rocky Mount races at the Rocky Mount Fairgrounds. Now obviously this is not talking about the fair itself, but it does reference the Rocky Mount Fairgrounds. And again, there's no address or anything listed here. But as is often the case with fairgrounds, they were used for special events throughout the year, weather permitting, of course. And so there were horse races, and in later years, I'm sure there were probably car races too. But this was, just a location that was convenient for a lot of people. And with the train making trips by there on a regular basis, it was easy to get to. If you didn't have a car to drive, if you could get to the train station, you could catch a train and get over to the fairgrounds. So anyway, and lastly, Lee, item number 4, if you would. This is actually another ad that appeared in the Telegram in September of 1919. And this ad says, "I'll say she does want to go to the fair dance Friday, October 3rd. So this would have been probably the weekend after the fair closed, because the fair was typically in September. But this was a fair dance, and it was held at the Farmers Mutual Warehouse. They had a band playing, the Curtis Jordan Society Orchestra. The event of the season, don't miss it. Dance tickets were $3, spectators free." A lot about this ad reminded me of the June German, of course. I'm not sure this was on the scale of June German. In fact, I'm sure it wasn't. That was a grand, spectacular event that went on for many, many years. But the fact that it was held in a warehouse, as in many cases the June German was each year, it was certainly a popular event, though not on par with the June German. It was something that apparently people looked forward to, and kind of to help kick the fair season out, if you will, and go into the winter, fall and winter. I was mistaken. There's one more here. Lee, let's go to item number 5. And this picture was another one of those from the Thorsby collection. And I'll read this caption. I know it's hard to read on your screen there. It says, "When even the dirt track at the fairgrounds was a matter of pride, this picture made about 1910 or 1912 of a view of the racetrack at the fairgrounds looking eastward, made probably from its elevation from a position in the grandstand. However, the love of horseflesh and the longing for speed and the rivalry of owners was then at its height, and 100 horses were not unusual that raced for purses that ran into thousands at each fair. Picking the winner was an art possessed by few but claimed by many, while it afforded hours of entertainment for the large grandstand crowds during the afternoons of Fair Week. It was this condition that no doubt prompted Major Thorsby in making this snapshot of the racetrack, which was to thousands the major point of any interest of any fair. All the races claimed their place on the program, with an event usually on the last afternoon of the fair, Saturday, while the thrills, spills, and wreck artists, the daredevils, followed them when it seemed evident that many people watched the mechanical spurts for speed with a singleness of purpose, namely to see the accident if it happened." So, as you can tell by this picture, it's a little grainy, it's a little hard to see, but there was quite a bit of effort put into this racetrack for both horse racing and later automobile racing. But again, this was over off Falls Road. In fact, I found a couple of maps, 3 in fact, that really kind of highlight this area a little better. So Lee, let's go to item number 6 if we could. This map is from 1919, and I want you to draw your attention, Lee, if you would, zoom in on this to that area on the left-hand side, and I think it's highlighted by number 4. So just zoom in on that 4, and once you can zoom in, there's a couple things I want to point out to you, because we're going to show you a picture in a minute taken from downtown Rocky Mount, and it mentions an object that I never knew existed, never knew anything about it, had to do some research and find out what it was. Is it already zoomed in? Okay. On the left-hand side, just below all the street address at the top up there, if you kind of zoom in on that area. Yeah. But this is actually, when we get it zoomed in, you'll see it's actually looking at the Church Street area where Church Street, there you go, where Church Street goes into Falls Road. And if you notice the little dotted looking line, that's of course the railroad track. And you see the main track comes down through Main Street of Rocky Mount alongside Main Street. And then there's a little curve, a little hump, if you will, and then it bears off to the left and goes down toward the Rocky Mount Mills. Right there, there's Gay Street and Thomas Street. And can you zoom in a little more, Lee? I'm not sure if it'll get you to get a little closer or not. If it lets you zoom in anymore, that may be all. Okay, that's good right there. Okay, I'm going to draw your attention up there in the upper left-hand corner in the yellow part. You see there's 4 numbered areas right there. It looks like, and it's a little blurry, I know, but it looks like it may be, I don't know, well, when you zoom in, it do get blurry. But of the 4 yellow squares you're looking at there, the bottom right-hand square has a little circle in it, and around that circle is the words standpipe. Okay, remember that, because I'm going to tell you a little more about a standpipe in a minute. But that's where it was located. That's on the corner of Thomas Street and Church Street, and kind of the backside of Quinn Furniture. Remember where Quinn Furniture was? I kind of give you a ballpark area of where we're talking about. You see in this picture, in 1901, Main Street was referred to as Railroad Street. If you look right in the middle of your screen there, where it says Railroad Street, that's actually Main Street. And you see some of the other streets got the same name they had now: Nash Street, Marigold Street, Western Avenue. But Main Street was known as Railroad Street in 1901. Okay, so back to the little yellow section up there where the 4 rectangular shapes are. In the bottom right hand of those 4 yellow shapes, the little circle designates, and above it says standpipe. Okay, Lee, so let's go then to item number 7. And item number 7 is another map, and I want to do the same thing. I want to zoom in on the area that is just to the left of item 2. This is a map from 1907. And in 1907, there's 2 things I want to point out on this map. And same area, Lee, the upper left-hand corner there where it's green and yellow. If you'll zoom in right on that yellow part. I'm not sure how clear it'll be for the viewers at home. Sometimes when you zoom in, there you go. Okay, hold that right there. So I want to draw your attention, folks, to the number 2 there where it's yellow. Okay, just to the left of that, and you see the little hump beneath the 2. That's the railroad track, and you see it go up to the left. Hold right there, Lee. Up there in the upper left-hand corner, just to the left of the number 2 in the white area over there, it says Fairgrounds. Okay, so that's where the fairground was. This was in 1907. This map's a Rocky Mount, 1907 map of Rocky Mount. So you see there, and as you come in from Main Street and come up that diagonal street just above the number 2 is Falls Road, of course, and it would continue on. It goes off the map image here toward Rocky Mount Mills. But there, off to the left, just as Falls Road is being cut off by the edge of the picture, you see that little oval shape. There is where the fairground was in 1907. So that's apparently where these racetracks were, and the grandstand were, and all these things in the early 1900s. That's where the fairground was. Now also, just beneath that yellow part in the pink, I don't know if you can zoom in any more, Lee, but kind of zoom in on those 4 pink sections. And again, you'll see the bottom right-hand corner. In the previous picture, it was yellow. Now it's pink, but there you go. You can see it says standpipe. Okay, it's got a little circle, a little plus there. Of those 4 pink sections in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, there you go. That's where the standpipe was. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what the heck is a standpipe? Okay, before we leave the conversation about standpipes, I want to look at one more map. So Lee, if you would, let's take this picture. We kind of got an idea where we are now. This is an idea where Church Street and Falls Road branches off to the left, and that's where the fairgrounds and so forth were. Okay, the last map is from 1912. And let's do the same thing, Lee, upper left-hand corner. When you get item 1912 map up there, and you see up there in the upper left-hand corner, the part that's highlighted in, number 5. You see that when you start zooming in, you'll see the numbers in the upper left-hand corner. And one of those areas, it's elongated in green, actually. That's item number 5. And this also shows the fairgrounds. And so this area, there you go. But in this picture now, by 1912, they don't refer to it as the fairground. They refer to it as the athletic park, okay? But you see there, the same area we're talking about, you see where Falls Road branches off to the left there off of Main Street and goes off to your left there. And that elongated green section there with a number 5 right in the center of it, that's Falls Road, of course. And just to your left of that, down and left of that, that big open area that's referred to in this picture as the athletic park was where the fairground was, okay? Again, this is kind of behind Parkview Hospital in the general area where Brownsville Park is. We talked about a swimming pool that was there back in the 1930s before they built the Sunset Park pool. There was a pool there. I think it lasted about 20 years in this general area. But anyway, that was a popular place for many years for all kind of athletic events. Certainly the fair was there, and a very popular place. Okay, so I just realized it's time for our first commercial break. So Lee, bring it back to me, and we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about a standpipe. I want to give you a little more information about the standpipe, tie all this together. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
Before the break, we were talking about the fairgrounds and about a standpipe. If you've never heard that phrase before, don't feel bad. Until today, I had never heard of it either. But as I was going through some more of these pictures from the John Sorsby collection, I ran across a picture from early Rocky Mount that, in fact, it was 2 different pictures, and one of them made reference to a standpipe. And actually, I'll show you in a minute the picture that has the standpipe in the picture. Essentially, a standpipe is a vertical pipe that doubles as a water tower. And so in the early 1900s, Rocky Mount had a standpipe in the area we showed you a while ago on the map there, over there by Quinn Furniture and so forth, that area right over there behind Quinn Furniture off of Church Street and Thomas Street. And so the way it worked was water was pulled from Tar River over by Sunset Park, went through the purification process there at the water plant, and was piped through pipes all the way over to that area where that standpipe was, and it was filled to capacity. And it was also referred to as Rocky Mount Reservoir. So it held something like 100,000 gallons of water. So it was a pretty impressive. In fact, I'll show you a picture in a minute. You'll see it stands out on the skyline of Rocky Mount pretty plainly. But obviously, it was very important to Rocky Mount, not only for a means of storing water, but in the event of a major fire, it would be used, of course, to help put out the fire. And as it turns out, in the early 1920s, there was a major fire downtown Rocky Mount that didn't have to be as major as it was, but the reason it was so major was because someone let all the water drain out of the standpipe. And so when it come time to fight the fire, there was no water in the standpipe. There was not enough water pressure in the mains to fight the fire, and several buildings burned down in that area out there. So I'm going to read something here to you, an article I found. We've talked in the past about a column that appeared many years ago in the Rocky Mount Telegram called I'm Thinking by an Old Reporter. We still haven't identified who the old reporter was, but in March of 1952, March 12th to be exact, this article appeared. And again, we don't know who the old reporter was, but he was talking to people who knew about this thing, excuse me, about the standpipe and some early history of Rocky Mount. So I'm going to read this article real quick. It's not too long. It'll kind of give you a little better idea of what I'm talking about. It starts off, recently we asked Bill Rice if he would recount what incident during his term as alderman representing the 6th Ward occasioned the greatest criticism of the board or dissension among its membership. We were surprised to have him tell us that the purchase of the Judge Chapman farm for conversion into Pineview Cemetery probably was less understood by the public, and it was hardest to get general acceptance for the idea of anything that was done while he was alderman. So who knew that? Pineview Cemetery was actually originally the Chapman farm, and the city of Rocky Mount purchased it specifically to make Pineview Cemetery. All right, the article goes on to say, then he retold how Mr. H.R. Kinlaw, the editor of the Rocky Mount Motor, a weekly publication, roasted the aldermen for their decision and expressed the thought that land enough had been acquired for 300 years and a city 100 times its population. However, it was recounted that in Baltimore about that time, much was being said against cremation and a practice of burying one individual above another. And so the alderman went ahead and made the purchase. The former alderman then outlined the building of the electric light plant, which is located in the building now used as Jenkins Pearsall Machine Shops, just west of Church Street and the National Railroad crossing. We had a young plant engineer named Price, and Frank Martin kept up the electric lines. And the superintendent at that time was J.M. Frost. Then he explained, I remember after we opened the water plant on Stony Creek that Frost lost his job when Fire Marshal Charlie C. Cooper preferred charges against him and proved that there was not sufficient water in the standpipe at the time of a fire which destroyed several dwellings owned by the late G.T. Matthews from the corner of Franklin Street and Western Avenue on the site of the J.W. Matthews home, and from there south in the direction of the W.L. Groom home. We hope to get in a question about the time the alderman passed a law muzzling the dogs, and the late Dr. Morton headed a delegation that had made at the Weldon some kind of meeting. It's blurred out here on the page. But the point I wanted to get to here was that this standpipe, in addition to being a reservoir for Rocky Mount's water, was instrumental in firefighting and making plans to be able to fight fires. And through negligence or mistake of some sort, all the water was allowed to drain out of the standpipe. And I think this was in 1921 or 22, somewhere along in there. But all the water drained out of the standpipe, and so a fire broke out. They didn't have enough water enough water pressure, I should say, to fight the fire. And consequently, several dwellings were destroyed in the fire. Okay, so in my search to find out more about this standpipe, again, I was doing some digging into newspapers.com website as I normally do, and I was looking specifically information that I could glean about the standpipe, where it was located, what it did, and so forth. And I ran across this ad, or a little short article, actually, it wasn't an ad, it was an article that appeared in the Telegram in April of 1917. If you would, Lee, put up item number 9. And, you know, this is, in addition to being a short article here, it kind of made me chuckle because Rocky Mount so desperately needs something like this now. Apparently in 1917, there was a women's club in Rocky Mount. It's hard to read, I realize, but it says, let's see here. The Vacant Lots Committee of the Women's Club of this city formulated plans at yesterday's meeting for, beautifying 2 lots. Mrs. Lee Bullock and her scouts, Girl Scouts, it says here Scout Girl, I think it means Girl Scout, have charge of Bland's vacant lot near the passenger depot. Mrs. E. Epstein and her Scout Girls have charge of a city lot on Thomas Street surrounding the standpipe. So this standpipe was located on city property, obviously, and so these women's club picked and chose different lots throughout the city, and in conjunction with the local Girl Scouts, or as they refer to here, Scout Girls, they went and beautified, cut the grass, planted flowers, whatever needed to be done to beautify these areas. So in 1917, Mrs. Epstein, and I'm fairly certain that's the wife of Epstein that ran Epstein's clothing store downtown Rocky Mount, but she took a group of Scout girls and they went to the city lot at the corner of Thomas Street and Church Street and cleaned up the lot that surrounded the standpipe at that time. Okay, been talking about the standpipe and to kind of explain to you what the standpipe was all about. Item number 10, if you would, Lee. This picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram in December of 1942, but it was actually taken, some 30 years earlier, 1910 or 1912 is what the caption reads here. And of course, this is another one of these from the Sorsby collection. You see the headline, yesteryear around here. And it says, an aerial view from the Masonic Temple's 3rd-story window. Now let me stop right here a minute and just point out, the Masonic Temple it's referring to here is not the one over on Church Street. This is on Main Street. In 1912, the Masonic Temple was over on Main Street, which at that time, of course, was still referred to, I believe, as Railroad Street. But anyway, it says an aerial view from the Masonic Temple's 3rd-story window about 1910, 30 years ago. Easily distinguishable are buildings now standing. Lower left-hand corner is the present Rose Drug Company building. The next building, easily discernible, is Wilkerson Bullock and Company. And beyond is the old Sagamore Club building that is still standing. The old water tank or standpipe, since removed, is discernible to the rear of the club building. So right in the center of the screen there, what looks like a smokestack, that's actually the standpipe. It says the old water tank or standpipe since removed is discernible to the rear of the club building, as is the stack of the Imperial Tobacco Company, while North Main Street is a very different appearance today with the addition of the Keogh and Avera building and other structures. So this picture taken somewhere around 1910, 1912, somewhere along there, shows very clearly this standpipe. And I've seen old pictures of Rocky Mount before, and if I've ever seen this standpipe, I do not remember it. Maybe some of you have seen pictures before that showed this standpipe. I didn't know anything about it. It was a total surprise to me. Now, one of the things I love most about these John Sorsby photographs is the fact that each caption gives some really nice information. And I'm sure that this was information that was put in at the time the article appeared. In other words, the picture might have been taken in 1910, but the caption was generated and put in along under the picture at the time it was published in the paper. In this case, 1942, December 7th, 1942, in fact. So, but again, each one of these pictures has a really nice little caption beneath it. And sometimes I have found the same picture would have different captions depending on when it was put in the paper. This appeared December 7th, 1942. Okay, Lee, if you would, put up item number 11. The very next year, not even a year later, in fact, March the 6th of 1943, the exact same picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram with a different caption. And the caption, and you can see the standpipe right in the middle of your screen. It's that big black thing right in the middle of the screen. That is the standpipe. And here's the caption as it appeared in 1943. West side of Main Street with tobacco market in the distance about 1910. The roof of the Rose Drug Company building and the insurance agency of Wilkinson Bullitt Company are discernible, while the residence, which at the time was the Sagamore Club, is easily recognizable, as is also the residence of the late Judge Jacob Battle adjoining. But beyond the street is entirely changed, and the budding shade trees have given way to business entrances. Beyond Wilkinson Bullock and Company, the old Thorpe Drugstore building has been torn down and is now replaced by the building of the Carolina Electric Construction Company, and just beyond is the store of Montgomery Ward and Company. The tall structure in black is the city reservoir and standpipe, while beyond in gray is the stack of the Imperial Tobacco Company still standing. The roofs of the buildings in the tobacco district are easily distinguishable, although a close examination indicates many changes and enlargements. So, like I say, this is basically the exact same picture taken from the same angle as the previous picture, but it's got a little more information in the caption than the previous picture did. And that's, to me, what makes these Sorsby collection pictures so really special. The pictures themselves are grainy, they're hard to make out in any real detail, but it's some really good information that appears in the bottom part, or the caption, I should say, of each one of these pictures. Okay, item number 12, if you would, Lee. This picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram March the 13th of 1943. It's another one of these yesteryear around here pictures, and it's another one from the Sorsby collection. And at first I thought I was looking at a swimming pool here, but it's not. Water reservoir and settling basin at power station in 1926. Few sections of the city have undergone greater changes in the last 15 years than the city power plant and pumping station on Tar River at Sunset Avenue Extension. The view shown above was the intake of 1926 of water from the river into a settling reservoir before being purified and chlorinated to again be pumped into the city standpipe to the rear of the First Presbyterian Church near Thomas Street. This settling basin has now been closed, and the foliage behind the picture has given way for the transformer station connecting the local plant with the Carolina Virginia Electric Company, and the handsome new water purification plant to the north of the highway. The city lake and adjoining 10-acre park with the Riding Academy beyond grace the southern side of the highway in this vicinity, while on the north bank alongside the river is the new Sunset Park with its outdoor stoves and picnic areas overlooking this, the new municipal swimming pool, athletic fields, courts, and playground. Something surprising about this, this appeared in 1943. Sunset Park, unless I'm sadly mistaken, wasn't officially open until 1950 something, I believe it was. So apparently, even though it wasn't an official opening until much later, as early as 1943, there was a park there where Sunset Park is today. And I guess in later years when they put the museum there, and I think the museum was built in 51 or thereabout, but when they put the merry-go-round and the train and everything else that was there, it officially became open as Sunset Park. Like I said, I think it was 1953 or thereabouts. But anyway, this was just a neat thing that I didn't know anything about. The fact that we had this standpipe and that water was purified there after it was drawn out of the Tar River by Sunset Park, and then piped with underground pipes all the way over. As the crow flies, it's not too terribly far if you think about it, but still, it's a right good distance to pump water to this standpipe, and then of course fill the pipe up. And one last thing on the standpipe, Lee, let's go to item number 13 if you would. And item number 13 is an article that appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram July 28th of 1937. You see the headline there, Water Standpipe Being Dismantled. Workmen began taking down the city standpipe on North Church Street near the Falls Road intersection today. It was learned today from Utilities Director George P. Wobble, the old standpipe having become unsafe and no longer necessary. Since the construction of the new 1 million-gallon overhead water tank on Marigold Street, and the older standpipe, which had a capacity of 100,000 gallons, is not needed and has been sold for scrap iron to Alec Rawls Wrecking Company. How many remember Alec Rawls Wrecking Company? They were a thriving company in Rocky Mount for many years. I remember as a small child, sat down on South Church in that area down there, as I recall. Anyway, weighing about 55 tons, the standpipe brought the city about $600. The the standpipe had it not been sold, the city would have had to pay them the same amount to have it repainted. Standpipe was erected in 1899. So from 1899 to 1937, this standpipe was a fixture on the Rocky Mount skyline, if you will, and it held 100,000 gallons of water and was there as a reservoir first and foremost, but certainly tied into our local water supply and crucial in combating fires and so forth in the area. And when it failed to be, when it was allowed to drain out, the consequences were pretty severe. It ended up losing several buildings in a major fire. So it stood the test of time. When it was time to take it down, it had done all it could do. It was no longer needed. I didn't realize that the water tank over on Marigold Street held as much water as it obviously did. I think it said 1 million gallons there. But anyway, it was certainly something that was very important to Rocky Mount's early development, and I was surprised to learn about it after 3 years now of doing this show. I do not recall ever hearing or seeing anything about a standpipe in downtown Rocky Mount. Lee, bring it back to me. It's time for our next commercial break. When we come back, we've got a few more of these George Sotheby pictures I want to share with you. And then I've been promising for a couple of weeks to share with you these pictures that I got from the UNC Wilson Library of the aerial shots of downtown Rocky Mount. In addition to those, there's a few other shots up and down Main Street that were taken back in the 1950s. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of
You know, this standpipe thing was something that, as I said earlier, I did not know it existed. I don't recall ever seeing a picture of it or reading about it or hearing about it in any way. And so, you know, it makes me wonder what other types of city functioning, utility-related structures appeared in Rocky Mount over the years that are no longer here. I'm sure there are others. I remember years ago, I had a conversation with one of the city employees about the storm drainage system under Rocky Mount. And it's kind of one of those things I'd love to just go down and investigate it. I'm not sure there's anything of real value down there to look at or see, but still there's a pretty intricate structure underneath, particularly downtown Rocky Mount, of storm drain pipes and so forth. And I mentioned before on the show that several years ago down at 5 Points in front of Old Man Gorham Drugstore, I was down there one time and they had right in the middle of the intersection there at 5 Points, they had a great big hole in the road. And I remember there being a huge, from my vantage point anyway, it appeared to be almost a room, and it was just a brick-lined area where a storm drain flowed underneath that area. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the same one that if you ride over Grand Avenue, go down Grand Avenue, before you get up to the railroad tracks and cross over the tracks on the right-hand side, there used to be a tobacco warehouse there, and this ditch, if you will, it's part of the storm drain system, flowed under that. And so I believe that's the same storm drain system that continues onward south, going all the way to 5 Points down there. And I'm not sure why they had to open that up, but I remember coming up the intersection and having a detour around it or whatever. But it's an amazing array of pipes and tunnels, if you will, under the city of Rocky Mount that are specifically put there to handle excess rainwater. I'm sure they got to work out there in Floyd and probably many times over the years since then. I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute of some flooding in Rocky Mount from the early 1900s that John Sorsby took also. But we think about Floyd and how much damage Rocky Mount incurred during Hurricane Floyd. And that was probably, admittedly, one of the worst flooding episodes in Rocky Mount's history, but certainly wasn't the only one. Rocky Mount has flooded several times over the years, and around 1910, 1912, some pretty severe flooding around here too. Okay, let's jump back into these. Let's go to item number 14 if we could. And again, I apologize, these pictures are just not very great quality. They were taken in the early 1900s. This one I think was 1920. But it was another one of these in this John Sorsby collection. And to me, the picture itself, you can make out some things, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it in just a second. But the caption is what really makes these pictures more important in my mind. So this one reads, looking southeast from the National Bank building about 1920, Washington Street within the 100 block is easily discernible from the tops of the stores, while the 3-story Drawn building, now occupied by the Pepsi-Cola Company at the corner of Hill and Washington, is in plain view. What they're referring to here on the far right-hand side of your screen on this image is a 3-story building. In this time frame, it was referred to as a Drawn building, and that was news to me. I never heard it referred to as a Drawn building. In later years, of course, it was a Pepsi-Cola bottling company, and it was also in later years, Camasco was in this building, and the Rocky Mount Popcorn Company was in this building. There was a laundry, not a laundromat, but a laundry company that sold washing machines and so forth, commercial laundromat equipment operated out of here, Bunco I think it was called. But anyway, it goes on to say, beyond, however, there seems to be but limited building, although the Edgemont School breaks the skyline in the distance. And it's almost impossible to discern from this angle, but that same building we're just talking about, the 3-story building on the far right-hand side, just about middle way of that building, above the 3rd and 4th windows, if you will, there's a rectangle shape, almost like a brick set on top of that building. And I believe that, it's really hard to make out, but I believe that is what they're referring to as the Edgemont School breaking the skyline in the distance. I would love to see the original of these pictures, and I'm still searching in earnest, trying to get my hands on them. But it goes on to say it was the 2nd school in the city school system and is located on Cokie Road. So from this vantage point, and obviously the lower left-hand corner, there's May and Gorham Drugstore there at the intersection. But like I said, from this vantage point, if this picture were more clear, you could get a lot more detail, obviously. But this predates, of course, what used to be the main post office there beside May and Gorham Drugstore. It certainly predates the Rose building that would have been behind the post office. So this is a very early picture of the Washington Street area, downtown Rocky Mount. And it's amazing how much change has transpired since this picture was taken. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 15 if we could. A couple things about this picture that really jumped out at me was the fact, number one, it was taken January the 20th of 1943. Well, I'm sorry, the picture itself appeared in the Telegram in January of 1943. The picture was taken in 1923. So this picture is 100 years old. And if you haven't already figured out, that's Rocky Mountain Mills on the left-hand side, and the bridge over Tar River there, the old iron bridge. And it's funny that this article, this caption I should say, and I'll read this to you, refers to it as the new bridge. It says, the new steel bridge across Tar River and a portion of the Rocky Mountain Mills as it appeared 40 years ago. So this appeared in the Rocky Mountain Telegram in 1943. So you know what, I misspoke. I said 100 years ago. It's more than that, because this picture appeared in 1903 apparently, because it refers here to appeared as it appeared 40 years ago. And this article appeared in a telegram in 1943. So 40 years from that would have been 1903. So this picture would have been taken in 1903. So it's 120 years old. But anyway, it says, and the waters of the river tumbling over the dam were a thing of beauty for Major Sorsby and his camera. The new steel bridge, and he's got the new steel in parentheses, or quotation marks I should say, the new steel bridge, as it was always termed during the 30 years that it did service, was so referred to because it replaced a covered wooden bridge at that point, which for years provided the only vehicular crossing for 12 miles in either direction on the Tar. The crossing at the end of Sunset Avenue and North Church Street are comparatively recent, while the bridge at the ACL pumping station beyond West Haven and near Williford Town and on the Daughtridge Farm and Cool Spring Roads in Edgecombe County are all less than 40 years in service. Now again, this appeared in 1943, so you know it's got a lot of history here to tell us about bridges and when they were built and how long they've been around and so forth. But I've seen other pictures, and I've shared the pictures of this steel bridge on the show, in past shows I should say. But I don't recall seeing this particular picture, but it was one of the John Sorsby pictures too. So, okay, Lee, one more, item number 16, if you would. This is another John Sorsby picture. I mentioned earlier about the flooding in Rocky Mount. It says, when there were man-sized floods in Tar River, a favorite place for viewing the ravages of the river was at the railroad bridge across Tar River at the northern end of the city. Prior to the days when the government removed the snags from the river and dredged deeper some of the narrower places, flooded areas were common for the period between 1905 and 1920. The picture shown here is believed to be the high water of 1912, and it may be noted that the pillar in the center of this bridge is entirely underwater, while the lone watchman on the bridge on the left-hand side of this picture is believed to be on duty to prevent floating debris from lodging against the bridge and doing damage in that way. Of course, at times he had to summon help, while on more than one occasion, loaded cars were placed on the bridge to add weight and strength against side crashing from debris that might be moving swiftly before the swollen stream. He's hard to see, but you can actually make out an individual in this picture on the far left-hand side of the bridge there. And he's, for lack of a better term, a bridge watcher, and his job is to watch the bridge and particularly watch for floating debris coming down the river that could potentially damage the bridge. And if he were to spot something that he couldn't, by his own abilities get out of the way of the bridge or push it aside, then he would call for assistance. And as it said, at some point they would just bring a loaded boxcar, or more than one if it need be, to give some strength and stability to the bridge so that any debris coming downstream would, hopefully not do any more damage. But this again was from 1910, 1912 is believed. And as you can see, if you've ever noticed that bridge, that's a right good ways above the water line, during normal river flow there. So, and at this picture here, the water is literally right almost at the level of the railroad track on the bridge itself. So Tar River was high there for sure. I can imagine there was some substantial flooding all over Rocky Mount, certainly in the vicinity of the Tar River. Okay, item number 17, if we could, Lee. This picture appeared in the Telegram in February of 1943. And I included this in here for a couple of reasons. Number one is it's a neat old picture. So it's about 1905 is when this picture was believed to have been taken. Just when 12 miles travel was a goodly distance, especially when it had to be recounted on the return trip and usually made within a day, Noble's Mill was a favorite recreation spot in Edgecombe County, for it was about equal distance for both Rocky Mount and Tarboro. While the lake itself had possibilities of fishing, boating, and bathing, the dance pavilion above lured the young people, especially for the holidays, when Square and Virginia Reel were indulged in the strains of a local orchestra with barnyard music, of which banjo and fiddle were no minor parts. Of course, with the coming of the automobile, visits were more frequent and of less length, and Major Soulsby here depicts some of the younger members of his family against the background of the dance hall and the picnic shelter. I don't recall seeing this picture before. I never knew there was a dance hall at Nobles Mill Pond, but if you remember a few months ago, we did a show about Silver Lake over off 58 between Rocky Mount and Wilson, and we showed a couple of pictures of a bathhouse there, and there was a dance hall there. And so apparently this was, I won't say it was commonplace, but certainly these areas where these mills were quite frequently places of gathering, and where there could be a beach created near the place. That was often done, and so people would swim and fish, and I'm sure there was some boating being done. In the summertime especially, it was a very popular place for various reasons. Okay, Lee, item number 18, if we could. This is a picture I think we've shown before on the show, but at the time we showed before, we didn't realize that it was one from the John Soulsby collection. And what you're looking at here, the caption says, "The new paved road of 1910 between Rocky Mount and Nashville at a point of the city electric plant in Tar River on an extension of Sunset Avenue. This paved road was the outcome of a fight waged by Rocky Mount citizens for a new county several years before, and was the first and longest link of pavement in the east, in the coast to capital from Elizabeth City. Later extended to Manio, Nags Head, and to Raleigh. The fight for the new county was waged on the basis of candidates for the legislature, and there was a lively battling on the occasion with the city as the loser. The picture shown here would not be easily recognizable as let me start again here. This is a little bit grainy. It says the picture shown here would not be easily recognizable as to position were it not for the then new power and pumping station to the left, for it has undergone considerable change and development, and immediately in the forefront to the left of the paving is now the entrance to West Haven development, and beyond is the city lake with the present 6 or 8 acre part in the intermediate forefront on that side of the highway. To the right of the highway is the western terminus of Bill Street, Stansel's store, and a service station where West Thomas now enters the highway. While the area marked by trees on the right-hand side of the highway would be near the transformer station alongside Tar River and the immediate front of the new water purification plant. So you're obviously looking west here, leaving Rocky Mount headed toward Nashville on this, at the time, a new paved road between Rocky Mount and Nashville. Again, pictures made in 1910. We're running out of time here, Lee. Let's go to item number 19 if we could. Picture was taken, the picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, March 1943. The caption reads, "Northeast part of the city embracing what is now Ward 2, with the building of 5 Points, May and Gorham Drugstore, and Rose apartments beyond." The picture made about 1910 discloses quite a few changes. If there is a study of the roofs as they exist today as compared to 30 years ago, an office and business property has replaced many residences, and the shade trees have given way to paved sidewalks and streets. The skyline beyond discloses greatly enlarged development as compared to the earlier days, and a new sewage disposal plant, warehouse building, and a new colored high school are now in positions shown as vacant or only sparsely settled at that time. So this picture says here made in 1910. It's a little better quality than some of the other ones, but still a little grainy, a little hard to get much detail. And lead item number 20, if we could. This is a picture of Mr. John Soulsby himself. Picture was not sure when it was made, guessed to be sometime in the early 20s. But that's John Soulsby there on the left-hand side, and he's actually posing while someone else took the picture. It says, Major Soulsby was one of the landmarks in the early growth of Rocky Mount, having come here to accept employment with the mercantile business of A.W. Arrington around 1880. It was in 1884 that he established the Standard Hardware Company, which he operated until 1915 when it was sold to the late J.L. Matthews. However, upon this sale, Major Soulsby was not out of business activity, for he again opened a hardware and paint business on Howard Street, which he was operating at the time of his death in 1925. Major Soulsby, in addition to being an authority on camping and attendant activities, was for a term alderman and treasurer for the city, on the first board of directors of Planters Bank and Trust Company, on the board of Underwriters Fire Insurance Company, and Citizens Building and Loan, and a number of business activities, and one of the larger property owners of the city. He was a very wealthy man, apparently, and very instrumental in getting Rocky Mount going in the early 1900s. One last picture, we've got time for this last one. We did not get to the aerial photographs. I'm sorry, we'll get those next week, hopefully. This last picture we're going to show tonight is of the Brownsville Library, of course. Item number 21, if you would. This was before the library was added on to. If you ride by there now, there's a wing on the left and a wing on the right being added. But this was taken in 1923, it says. And that's how the library looked when it was first built. Folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. We've run slam out of time. Lee, bring it back to me. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Hopefully we'll have next week the pictures, the aerial photographs. I do apologize. I'd hope to show them tonight. We just ran out of time. But I thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourselves a great week, folks. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. And we'll see you next week with more Wayback Wednesday. Good night.